And we are back. Howdy, everyone. Let's finish this. I see Tyler and Marshall are in the chat already. So I think just a short one today. The next chapter is not an ultra big one, but the next chapter is still like, what would you say, like 30 or so pages. But I like doing the full chapters in a full stream, so we'll just finish this one off today. This has been a very impressive chapter, though. The chapter on art, fantastic. I want to come back to this one day, going through all the different forms of art, and especially that on like actors and improv. Really interesting. Anyway, howdy y'all, howdy y'all. Welcome to the stream, welcome to the stream. If you're watching now or in the future, if you want to help support the channel in these efforts, you can give a donation via PayPal or on Ko-fi, or become a YouTube member. 34 pages, no big deal, says Tyler. Yeah, exactly. Compared to 80 pages that we did last week, Jesus Christ. Or about 70, I think we've got 10 left or something. Anyway, let's just jump into it. So we left off with Beelzebub basically describing the crystallization of different how would you say, different attributes of the Kundabuffer within these actors of Hassian's favorites. So swagger, pride, self-love, vanity, self-conceit, self-enamoredness, envy, hate, offensiveness. I'm not sure if he's describing politicians or actors. But yeah, so this is all of Hollywood right here, just perfectly described. These enumerated consequences are particularly conspicuously and strongly crystallized in just those contemporary, sorry, just let me move something over here, contemporary representatives of art. And Gurdjieff really goes in deep hating on artists. But he likes improv artists, apparently, who are the manipulators of the contemporary theaters there. And they are particularly strongly crystallized in them because always performing the roles of being similar to themselves, whose being and significance in the process of their existence are ordinarily far superior to their own, and also, as I have already said, being themselves really almost non-entities, they, with their already wholly automized reason, gradually acquire false notions about themselves. So he's basically describing, this is the actor who's really a nobody. He's really deep inside there. Maybe actors are rich, but inside they're in a state of poverty. There's nothing inside them really, but you play a president, you play a king, you play a great warrior or someone from history, and then that kind of rubs off on them, and they act in those ways almost as if they are those things, but really they're nothing. With such an already quite automatized consciousness and completely nonsensical feeling, so everything in them's false, they feel themselves to be immeasurably superior to what they really are. Yeah. I mean, how many actors just stand up and be like, we all need to do this one thing. You need to be a good person and donate, or you need to be they get actors say these things, and it's like, man, I always think about how many Coke parties have you been to? I actually shouldn't say that on YouTube. But like, how many parties, white powder parties have these people been to? How much, how many casting couches have you been on, lady? Why are you telling me how to act? So, Beelzebub says, Diddy, is that you? Says Tyler. Exactly. Five Nights at Diddy's the scariest of all video games. I must confess, dear Hassian, that though during our earlier visits to the surface of that planet of yours, and also at the beginning of this last sojourn there, I went about everywhere and had various relations with those three-brained beings who have taken your various relations. I want to, because, he doesn't like, do aliens and humans do it? One thing that's interesting about Gurdjieff, I've kind of noticed this. I mean, when you read, like, In Search of the Miraculous and stuff, Gurdjieff has this whole thing about the sexual energy, but then he, like, doesn't mention it. And, apparently Gurdjieff was a little, he got with the ladies in his life. But at the same time, there's this weird thing. It's like the sexual energy is incredibly important. Sexual transmutation, exoheri, is the thing that's sublimated into higher being bodies. And then he's just like, doesn't kind of mention, he mentions some things important, and then he just kind of, it's like that thing of an absence being a presence. The fact that he doesn't mention things makes them stand out. And I'm like, what do you mean by various relations? Anyway, I scarcely ever felt in my common presence a genuine impulse of being pity for the infinitely unhappy fate, take a shot, of these favourites of yours due to circumstances hardly depending on themselves at all. But when towards the end of that sixth sojourn there, certain of them were formed with the kind of inner presence which is now possessed by all the representatives of almost all the branches of that art of theirs. So almost everyone who is an artist has this. And when these newly arisen types taking part in the process of ordinary being existence on the basis of equal rights with the other three-brained beings, there happened to get into the field of the reception of my sight, with their already exaggerated inner abnormal what is called being self-appreciation. Then they served as a shock for the beginning of the arising in me of the impulse of pity, not only for themselves, but also for all those unfortunate favorites of yours in general. So, being self-appreciation, being self-satisfied with the way you are, but actually being nothing. Like, so you're so deluded, you're just like, yeah, I'm good. And it's like, but there's actually nothing there, you're hollow. That was so shocking to Beelzebub, it actually made him pity humanity. Whereas everything else before this, he was like, they're just silly little guys. But now he actually pities us because of this. So very, very interesting take there. Try now to give your attention not to all the three-brained beings in general, nor to the other representatives of their contemporary art, but just to those who have become and have acquired the title of artists or actors. Every one of them really being in respect of genuine essence almost what is called a non-entity, is something utterly empty but enveloped in a certain visibility. They have gradually acquired such an opinion of themselves by means of favourite exclamations, always and everywhere repeated by themselves, like genius, talent, gift. And that's one of those things where you kind of see people who are delusional, but sometimes when you look at them or you learn about their life, you're like, did they really have a chance? Like, they were surrounded by people who just called them genius, talented, everything you do is amazing. Did those people really have a chance to not be delusional? So yeah, I kind of, you kind of get where he's coming from. It's like, you kind of pity those people. You're like, oof. And still, a number of other words empty, also like themselves, that it is as if, among similar beings around them, only they have divine origin. Only they are almost God. So we call actors stars. Stars as if they're so high. And they shine in the sky, but I'm really feeling it. I'm really feeling that. Now listen and try to substantiate for use at the proper time in the corresponding parts of your common presence my really very practical advice. Okay, so he's going to give us something practical. This practical advice of mine is that for some reason or other, you should have to exist, particularly in the near future, among the three-brained beings of that planet Earth, which has taken your fancy. So this is interesting because we exist among the three-brained beings of planet Earth. So this may be practical advice. Let's see what he says. I say in the near future because the presences of these three-brained beings who have taken your fancy and all the already fixed exterior conditions of their ordinary being existence frequently degenerate. And if you should have some work or other there, proper to every conscious three-brained being, which has as its basis the aim of attaining welfare for surrounding beings, and the fulfillment of which depends partly on them themselves, then in whatever community of the contemporary civilization this may proceed, If you should have to meet, in the interests of your work, these contemporary terrestrial types, in what are called their circles, you must never fail to be very, very careful and to take every kind of requisite measure to keep on good terms with them. So he's basically saying if you ever, whatever business you have, if you end up being in front of these, what would you call them, pseudo-Hannesmusens, basically actors or artists, you need to be very careful, and this is how you should treat them. Why you must be so careful towards just them, and in order that you may in general better represent to yourself and understand from every aspect these terrestrial contemporarily arisen types, I must without fail mention two further facts which became quite clear there. The first is that owing, as always, to the same conditions of ordinary being existence, abnormally established there, and also to the existing illusorily inflated maleficent idea of their famous art, these representatives of art gradually become crowned, as I have already said, with an imaginary halo in the preconceived picturings and notions of other three-brained beings there. I mean, that's what makes them so effective speakers. You know, when they do wheel out a Hollywood person to be like, we all need to go to vote or something. It's like, that person is also delusional of themselves. It's not just that they've been crowned, they also believe in the crown that they wear, and thereby automatically acquire an undeserved authority. In consequence of which all the rest of your favorites always, and in everything, assume that any opinion they express is authoritative and beyond dispute. Marshall says these great actors represent the interests of the flies in the marketplace and are upheld by these flies. Nietzsche talks about this in Thus Spake Zarathustra in chapter 12. Flies in the there you go. I have this conspiracy that Gurdjieff was a real big fan of Nietzsche and read a bunch of his stuff. One day, that's one of my dreams. One day I want to write a little essay or even a book comparing Gurdjieff and Nietzsche, like a comparative study or something. That'll be cool. And the second fact is that these contemporary types who have recently arisen there acquire, as they are formed, a corresponding inner presence that permits them to become, quite unconsciously on their part, just as easily somebody's slave, as, thanks merely to chance exterior conditions, they can become his worst enemy. That's interesting. Yeah, damn straight, Marshall. Gurdjieff is definitely a Nietzschean. The Superman, I mean, there's so many things, little similarities, the Nietzsche talks about the drives in man and Gurdjieff has the centers. Nietzsche talks about the organizing idea is kind of like the magnetic center of gravity that Gurdjieff talks about. And, the different hierarchies of man 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then there's man and the Superman. And it's almost like, Gurdjieffianism is just applied Nietzschean philosophy. In some cases. Well, it's interesting. It's interesting. Anyway, so I just read this. This was interesting. And the second fact is that these contemporary types who have recently arisen there acquire, as they are formed, a corresponding inner presence that permits them to become quite unconsciously on their parts, just as easily somebody's slave. So actors, they're really interesting. They gain a false authoritative, a false authority, but then they're easily made slaves. So they're easy to manipulate. And thanks merely to chance exterior conditions, they can become his worst enemy. And also, they can just be bent. And, the person who enslaves them can become their friend, their enemy. But that thing about the slave is very interesting because, it's not the act. In the end, the actors are just the victims as well. It's the people behind the actors that kind of manipulate all of these things. So interesting, the knots in this world that he's kind of describing. You just kind of see it and you're like, yeah. That is just why I advise you to be very, very careful not to make enemies among them, so as not to make a lot of trouble for yourself in the actualizing of your affairs. Yes, so this is the practical advice. He's like, don't make enemies of actors or artists. Just be cool, just be chill. Well then, dear Hassien, the very tismus? Because it's not tis, it's t. Tsimas, like tzaddik, tsimas, zimas, tsimas. There we go. I got it. I got there eventually. Tsimas of my advice. I guess the crux, what would you say, or the hinge point of his advice, if you're gonna be Wittgensteinian, the hinge point of his argument, the tsimas of my advice to you, is that if you should indeed have to exist among the beings of that planet Earth and have dealings with these representatives of contemporary art, then you must first of all know that you must never tell the truth to their face. Ooh. So if you go to LA, lie to everybody. Let fate spare you this. Any kind of truth makes them extremely indignant, and their animosity towards others almost always begins from such indignation. To such terrestrial types, you must always say to their face only such things as may tickle those consequences or the properties of the organ Kunda buffer. That's very interesting. So it's like they're professional manipulators who are also themselves slaves to other forces. And basically, you just got to kind of get by and don't anger them. So you just realize what attributes they have, and you just kind of tickle their Kunda buffer just to get by. You just tickle her. Hey, you really are great, Kevin Bacon. It's like, yes, I am. Yeah. Can I have an autograph? No. And it's like, you don't really want his autograph. You just ask for it because you know it inflates his ego, and then you're like, okay, and then you just leave, and you haven't been damaged by them. Oh, Tyler used to live in LA. Tyler says I lived there. The traffic is more fun than dealing with actors. Belch. Yeah. Just the. No one's going to use the indicators don't exist. Just going to go across a whole bunch of traffic. Good luck, everybody. Ooh, our tuition says not speaking the truth aloud is not necessarily lying. Just say what you need to. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so you got to tickle that Kunda buffer. So tickle those consequences of the properties of the organ Kunda buffer, unfailingly crystallized in them, and which I have already enumerated, namely envy, pride, self-love, vanity, lying, and so on. So just like that guy's not as good as you are. That hits, envy and pride, that manipulation, the self-love. You're amazing. Self-love and vanity. You're amazing. You're the best. And their own lying. Then they'll say something that's a complete fabrication, like, I invented electricity, and you're like, yes, you did. Yes, you're such a good actor. I played Edison in a movie, therefore I invented electricity. You just give it to them. Yes. They're surrounded by yes men, so you just kind of wear that as a cloak while you're around them, and you just slip by, and hopefully they don't notice. And the means of tickling, which infallibly act on the psyche of these unfortunate favorites of yours are, as I noticed during my stay there, the following. Suppose that the face of one of these representatives of art resembles the face of a crocodile, then be sure to tell him that he is the image of a bird of paradise. You can't be honest. You can't be like, am I good looking enough to get this job? And then you just be like, don't be like, if you and Steve Buscemi went into a beauty contest, you'd probably win. No, you got to tell him, no, you're amazing, bro. You're amazing. You got that jawline. You can do it. Don't tell him the truth. If one of them is as stupid as a cork, say that he is the mind of Pythagoras. I love his examples. As stupid as a cork. Is this like an old saying that no one says anymore? That guy's as stupid as a cork. In his conduct in some business, if his conduct in some business is obviously super idiotic, tell him that even the great cunning Lucifer could not have thought out anything better. Suppose that on his features you see signs that he has several terrestrial diseases from which he is progressively rotting day by day. Then with an expression of astonishment on your face ask him, do please tell me, what is your secret for always looking so fresh, like peaches and cream? And so on. Only remember one thing, never tell the truth. Although, you have to, so this is this invention of lying, this technique of lying that Gurdjieff is telling us to use, It's basically a self-preservation tool that exercises your imagine. You just need to be more imaginative. You just need to obviously you don't be. There's this interesting thing because Immanuel Kant is wrong about morality. I'm just going to go off on a little rant here. Everyone, you got to treat everyone the same. That only applies if everyone has the same internal nature. But human nature, smooth brain equals cork brain. Oh my god, sorry. Jules is reading the chat. Human nature isn't one solid thing that never changes. Human nature is in continuous flux. We're all different. And the implications of that and the social contract are actually terrifying. Because you could say that it's perfectly acceptable for some people who are at a specific level to lie to you. And it would be ethical for them to lie to you, but it would be unethical for you to lie to them. And at first you're like, what? That sounds what? But I mean, think of it like a teacher lying to you to like help you. Like, in sports, the boxer who really needs like that motivation, and his trainer is like, you're the best, you're the greatest, and it like deludes him into actually going further than he would have. Or even there's the normal one that everyone experiences of, if you're a parent or if you were a kid, and it's that thing of when you're learning to swim and your parents are holding you and it's like, okay, now I'm going to let go. It's like, no, don't let go. And they're not holding you and it's like, I've got you. They're telling you, I've got you. They don't got you. But if they told you that they didn't have you, they weren't holding you, you would panic and like stop treading water and actually drown. But because they're lying to you and saying, no, I'm still holding you, you're kind of able to tread water by yourself, and that initiates a kind of competence. So there's this thing, very, because we're in a state where we're too degenerated to kind of set it up like, okay, now all of the people who are at this level, you should just go to the top of, we're in the Kali Yuga, all of the most degenerate people are at the top, so you can't like reinitiate a society on these principles. But basically that is how things kind of are naturally. There are some people who it would be unethical for you to lie to, but there are other people who, because of their internal nature, it is completely ethical. Your ethos. It is completely ethically okay to lie to them, which is, what everyone kind of quotes about Immanuel Kant. It's like, Immanuel Kant treat everyone the same. And it's like, so when a bloodthirsty murderer comes to your home and wants to kill people inside your house, what do you do? Like, and you're hiding, so, the whole Nazis come and you're hiding someone in the cupboards and they ask if anyone's in your cupboards, you're going to lie. It's ethically okay to lie to some people because of their internal nature. Tyler says, reminds me of XC race that my coach told me a certain something to get me to sprint the last quarter mile. It worked. He said what he needed to say. Yeah, exactly. Happens in sports all the time. And Marshall says, sometimes those lies lead to good outcomes. Yeah, and so this is the other thing. It's like someone who has enough foresight can do something that seems negative, but it has a positive outcome. Whereas most people do things that seem positive, like they do things with good intentions, and then the outcome is like the worst thing in the entire world. I have this funny story of like some friends, and they were like in this car on a road trip, and they were kind of in this state of like, we got to do good. They were going through like that Christian phase. We just got to do good. And they're on like a highway, and one of them saw a turtle walking across the highway, and they're like, oh my God, another car might come and crush the turtle. We need to stop and help the turtle cross the road. And so, but it's a highway, but there was no one else on this highway or freeway. I can't remember what it was. It was like one of those long strips in the middle of nowhere. And there was no one else around. So they stopped the car and they got out to walk down to this turtle. But as soon as they stopped the car and they got out, over like the hill that they just came from, a truck came. And yeah, you know where this story is coming. And because they had stopped the car and were on the road, the truck was like, well, I can only get in this other lane, which is where the turtle was, and it killed the turtle. And it's the whole thing is like, if they just kept driving, the turtle would have been fine. But because they had this great intention, we need to do good things. messed up. They messed it up. They messed it up. Anyway, Dylan and Eternal Mastery have entered the chat. Welcome, guys. Welcome, guys. We're just talking about meta ethics, I guess. So this is another reason to, get really deep. Self-observe. Self-observe. Understand your own nature. Understand your own nature, your own internal kind of get-up. And it's like, if you can understand kind of what you are and then what others are in that relationship, you can kind of plot things or see things in the future. See things as they go. Turtle or tortoise? Oh yeah, right. So I'm an idiot. Just reading the chat. Yeah, it's a tortoise. It was a tortoise. Outtuition says, I was told by my mentor not to do what's right or true, but to do what's wise. Hey, that's a good line. Now, what is wise? That depends on the circumstances and my will. Yeah, I'd say what is wise depends also on your ability, your prescient ability of like foresight and development. Because you can only kind of do up to your level in a sense, like what, fully enlightened Buddha would do and what, one of the generic bodhisattvas would do is different. And then what a bodhisattva would do to just a normal human that has, who has good intentions, but the values of their culture is also different. Anyway, we're getting ultra sidetracked with this. Let's just keep going. Although you have to behave in this manner toward all the beings in general of that planet, it is particularly necessary to do so toward the representatives of all the branches of contemporary art. So he's like, it may be necessary to do here or there, but all artists and actors, you need to do this to them, or else, or else they're just going to go crazy. Having said this, Ahun, with the affectation of a Moscow suburban matchmaker at the marriage of her clients. Wait, what? Sorry, Ahun, with the affectation of a Moscow suburban matchmaker at the marriage of her clients, or of the properties of a Parisian fashion workroom in what is called High Life Cafe, began rearranging the folds of his tail. Huh? What? And Hassian, looking at him with his usual sincerely grateful smile, said, "Okay, we're getting a Hassian line, everyone. I'm excited. Very many thanks to you, dear Ahun, both for your advice and in general, for your elucidation of certain details of the strangeness of the psyche of the three-brained beings of that, in all respects, ill-treated planet of our great universe." And then he turned to Beelzebub himself with the following words: "Please tell me, kind grandfather, it is really possible that nothing has resulted from the intentions and efforts of those Babylonian learned beings, and that indeed nothing whatsoever has passed off those fragments of knowledge which were already then known on the earth to the contemporary three-brained beings of that strange planet." Man, Hassian actually got some lines. Hell yeah. At this question, his grandson Beelzebub said as follows: "To the great sorrow of everything existing," yeah, come on, man, tell us there's something. "Everything existing in the universe, scarcely anything has survived." So there's something. You're saying there's a chance something survived, my boy, from the results of their labors, and hence nothing has become the property of your contemporary favorites. Although, remember, in, what was it, chapter 23, he talked about, like, basically there being some kind of akashic records around the planet, and if you get to a certain level of being development, you can access that. So, there's still hope. The world is, Outro says, the world is but a stage, and actors have their role to play too. Yeah. The information they indicated in the said manner passed from generation to generation, only in all for a few of their succeeding centuries. All for a few, okay. A few of their succeeding centuries. Thanks to their chief particularity, namely to the periodic process of reciprocal destruction, a war, They're almost wholly disappeared from amongst the ordinary beings there soon after the period of the Babylonian magnificence, not only of legomenism, concerning the keys to the lawful inexactitudes in the law of sevenfoldness contained in each of the branches of the being Afalkalna and Solgenoa, soldier boy. But, as I have already told you, there gradually also disappeared even the very notion of the universal law of the holy heptaparaparshinok, which in Babylon they called the law of sevenfoldness. Every kind of conscious production of the beings of the Babylonian period was gradually destroyed, partly owing to decay from time to time, and partly owing to the processes of reciprocal destruction. That is to say, to that degree of that psychosis of theirs called the destruction of everything existing within the sphere of the perception of visibility. Sometimes you just want to destroy things, baby. You just want to tear down some statues, unfortunately. Ruin our history. Thanks chiefly to these two causes, almost all the consciously actualized results of the learned beings of the Babylonian epoch gradually disappeared from the surface of that ill-fated planet, and at such a tempo that after 3 of their centuries scarcely any of them were left. It must also be noticed that thanks to the second mentioned cause, there also gradually diminished and finally almost entirely ceased the employment of that new form which had been established since Babylonian times for the transmission of information and various fragments of knowledge to subsequent generations through the beings they called initiates of art. To the second mentioned cause also gradually. Okay, so wait a second. Is this a negative thing he's saying? Let's see what he says, but it seems like he's saying fragments have survived thanks to the initiates of art. So what he's saying is no complete system survived, and also a lot of the beings who actualized the the processes of those systems have survived, but the fragments of the system has, thanks to the initiates of art. About the disappearance there of just that practice of certain beings becoming initiates of art, I know very well, because just before my departure forever from that planet, I had to elucidate this very carefully for another aim of mine. And for the purpose of making this clear, I even specially prepared a very good ticlunia among the beings there of the female sex, and made these elucidations of mine through her. Hello. They're more of shards than fragments. Yeah, I know, right? Maybe even a splinter off that shard every now and then. What's ticluna? Okay, we're gonna... Ticlunas were formerly called their pythonesses. Okay, so oracles, but contemporary ones now call them mediums. Wait, I specifically prepared a very good ticluna. So he prepared an oracle, or a seeress, and made elucidations through her. If you collect enough shards, you level up. Exactly, Dylan, exactly. That's why we read these books. Gurdjieff buries a whole bunch of shards, or buries the dogs, as he says. So we got to dig up those dogs. Ticlunas were formerly called pythonesses, but contemporary ones now call them mediums. So he got a medium, and he spoke through her, and everyone was like, oh my god, this medium's amazing. AKA crystal mummies. Yes, out tuition. He got himself a big old TikTok crystal mummy, and she spoke to her people, her followers, and they were amazed. So then I made it clear that there, in most recent times, only 4 of such beings, initiates of art, still remained, by means of whose what is called immediate line of inheritance. The keys to understanding of the ancient art still continue to be transmitted. And this transmission of inheritance now proceeds there under very complex and arcane conditions. Of these 4 contemporary initiated beings, one comes from amongst those who are called Redskins, oh boy, who dwell on the continent America. Another from among the beings dwelling on what are called the Philippine Islands. Philippines mentioned. Okay. Maybe, did Gurdjieff speak Tagalog? I don't think he did. But that's interesting. Okay, so we got... It's interesting, he's not going like, oh, it's the Greeks, it's the Romans. He's like, nah, they're all dumb. We got American Indians, we got Filipinos. The third, from beings of the continent Asia, from the country called the source of the river Pianji. Hold up. What do we got? What the hell is that? Oh, fuck off. Oh my god. River Pian... No. So it's just a freaking made-up Gurdjieff word, huh? Okay. Where could that be? So he said somewhere in Asia, and he said it's a big river. Maybe Pianji, maybe it's the Yellow River. Maybe he's saying like it's not like China greater, but some like obscure little kind of aspect of it, maybe. Oh yeah, maybe like North India. Maybe it's like North India, like North East India, or like one of these more obscure places in China. Could be something like that. Afghan's too close to Tikliamish kind of territory, so that's why I'm kind of... He specifically said, oh, but I mean, it is in Asia. Anyway, so we got Native Americans, Filipinos, maybe an obscure Chinese... Wait, what does it say? Tyler says, the Panji River forms much of the border between Tajikistan and Afghanistan. Okay, so maybe it is. Is he talking about Yazidi? Is that what he's talking about then? That's interesting. Mongols are the most psychic. Mongols are psychic and talk to animals. Says out... I'm saying that to out tuition. Yeah, that's a good point, Tyler. Okay, so Tyler says Panji River is a border between Tajikistan and Afghanistan. Makes me wonder... So Gurdjieff was connected with some Yazidi at some point. Caucasians, maybe. But I think this is a candidate for Yazidi. He's just not mentioning the name. Tajik River. Dylan, please. So Native Americans, Filipinos, Yazidi, and the fourth last are from those called Eskimos. So these races, these peoples, these groups have understanding of art and have maintained an initiatic lineage of art all the way back to those ancient initiates who basically managed to crystallize certain positive, certain positive attributes in themselves that allowed them to attain a higher being level. So this is Caucasus Steppes. Where's Tajikistan, Afghanistan? I mean, Caucasus Steppes are over here, right? That's more Caucasus Steppes. We're over here. I mean, that's still kind of... You can imagine some Caucasian guys there. Where's that Panji River? That's interesting, though. That's interesting. That's real interesting. But I think that's I'm going with that at the moment. That's my working thing. So we got Eskimos, which I know nothing about. Filipinos, I know a bunch of Filipinos, but like know nothing about their traditions. You know, all of that, like the other Asian stuff. You know, you get China, you get Japan, you get Korea, but you never... A lot of the kind of cool shamanistic stuff in places like, you know, Burma and Laos, Vietnam. Where are the Filipino islands? Where's Philippines? Bruh. Oh, there they are. Okay. You never kind of like hear much about all of their esoteric kind of stuff. It's all kind of just unknown. Negros. Oh my god. There's an island called Negros? Luzon sounds like a cool name. I can imagine a fantasy character called Luzon. You know, I'm tripping now. I'm getting obsessed over this. So but anyway, there's some four things. I wonder if like the four kind of correspond to elements. Redskins, maybe that's fire. Philippine Islands is water. Continent of Asia in the middle of nowhere in a dry desert, that's earth. And the last, the Eskimos at the roof of the world, they're air? Could be something like that. Eternal Mastery says, I was listening to Robert Sefer speaking about this, how it also stemmed from Scythians and solidified Zohar Kabbalah. Yes, 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 Mr. Sefer. Mr. Sefer's an interesting guy. But yeah, I like his, some of this, he's got some interesting narratives. He's got some interesting narratives. And once again, this is Gurdjieff indicating and leading us to places. And I always like lesser known sources that you don't usually look at. Zohar's always hard to dip into because really, unless you speak Hebrew, no, actually, not even that. Zohar's written in like some obscure Aramaic, so even if you did Aramaic, you may not understand the original Zohar. You need like specifically to do a course in Zoharic Aramaic to get the full story, but there's its influence on the Western esoteric tradition is pretty massive. Anyway, and so there's all these other links. Like I maintain that the Tarot is also a kind of legomanism that has descended to us. I'm a big fan of that theory. So Meditations of the Tarot, my boy, Valentin Tomberg. I think there's definitely something to say about that, but there's the Lord of the Wind, Robert Sefer. Dylan, stop. Marshall Esoterist says Southeast Asian Buddhism does have some connection to Vajrayana Buddhism, which has connection to esoteric Tantra Buddhism. So, well, that's the other thing. Not the Philippines in particular. In Tantric Buddhism, I mean, there's a whole bunch of different Mahamudra, Dzogchen, and all of that. But someone was saying how Kala Chakra Tantra, its original Pali context actually comes from like Indonesia. And like down here, so there's its actual like historical origin kind of comes from downwards, and there's a lot of things people like talk about Vajrayana and Mahayana, the greater vehicle, and it's like, oh yeah, these places they just do Theravada, the Hinayana, the lower vehicle. But there's some like, there is actually some esoteric Theravadan stuff that always gets kind of knocked to the side. And you know, Buddhism is also very syncretic, so I wouldn't be surprised. A lot of shamanistic magic also doesn't get synthesized into Buddhism, but it's just allowed to coexist. And so, unlike Christianity, which will go in and just dominate everything and either completely erase things, or maybe if the smart druids kind of can smuggle in some things like, you know, Saint Bridget is actually the goddess Bridget into, you know, the Catholic Church and things like that. But it's like, with Buddhism, it's very different. Buddhism just allows the things to exist next to it, and just so giga-chad people lose interest in the other thing and just go full Buddhist. But a lot of the times you have really, next to Buddhism, you have really ancient stuff just being preserved. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's something in these islands that Gurdjieff is relaying to. Your Taro video is how I found your channel. Thanks, bro. I agree entirely and had similar conclusions. Yes. Dylan says Taro's for newbies, real spiritual maths. Magic the Gathering. Thank you, Dylan. Thank you. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. I know we got like last 10 pages left. We should have already finished by now, but looks like we're just having fun. Now, listen. Why I used the expression almost when I said that at the end, yet now you're getting me hard, Gurdjieff. I'm throbbing right now. Don't just edge me. Don't just edge me, Gurdjieff. At the end of 3 of their centuries after Babylonian period, there almost entirely ceased to exist every kind of conscious and automatic reproduction of being Afalkalna and Solgenoa. Alfalfa and Soldier Boy completely ceased to exist. The point is that 2 branches of the conscious hand productions of the beings of the Babylonian period chanced upon favorable conditions, and some of them passed from generation to generation, partly consciously and partly automatically, on the part of the transmitting beings. I also think Freemasonry is like that. Some of it's consciously passed on, and a lot of it nowadays is just automatically passed on. They don't even know what they're passing on, but it's still there if you've got the kind of the wherewithal. I remember seeing a bunch of like, you know, when you like meet a mason and in their getup, and they've got like all of the medals there, and you kind of look at one. I remember because I've got a friend who's a mason. There's one guy I was looking at, and he just had this one medal, and it was like a cross, and it had the Yod He Vav He, and right in the middle it had the Shin, and I'm like, that's pure like Kabbalah right there. That's some hardcore, you know, Christian Kabbalah. You know, Johannes Reuchlin, like whoever created that medal, that medallion, knew what they were doing. And I like was asking him about it, and he's like, like he had no idea what the hell he was wearing was like an incredibly esoteric symbol. But it's like they're still there. There's still all of this stuff left, like locked in there, waiting for someone to come and, you know, just to have a little taste. Our tuition says syncretic beliefs religions is what I think religions that adapt to where they're spread and incorporate native. Yes, yeah, yes. Now he's Gurdjieff is edging us here. He's saying there actually is something that has managed to come down. Almost everything was lost, but there is one thread that has continued. So, one of the said two branches recently ceased to exist, but the other has even reached certain beings of contemporary times, almost unchanged. Yep, let's go. Come on, Gurdjieff. This branch, which reached beings of contemporary times, is called sacred dancers. PP strong. PP strong. And thanks to this branch alone, which survived from the period of the Babylonian learned beings, a very limited number of three-brained beings there now have the possibility, by means of certain conscious labors, to decipher and learn the information hidden in it and useful for their own being. That's interesting. Does anyone remember, like, Muay Thai, Tony Jaa, Ong Bak, those movies? Can I remember when Ong Bak dropped? Like, this is like years ago, like over 10 years ago. Everyone was talking about like Jackie Chan and then Jet Li and then Donnie Yen was making movies. And then just out of Thailand, these like movies came with Tony Jaa just like throwing knee kicks and like doing spinning stuff. And everyone was like, whoa, everyone in the martial arts community or who loved martial arts loved these movies. Ong Bak, Protector, they were all great. So Thai. Those movies were so Thai. But the thing that I always remembered is, was it Ong Bak 2? Where he like, it goes into the past and it's like the story about the town's Buddha, and the town's Buddha gets stolen and he goes and he fails and he gets beaten up or something. But then he gets rehabilitated. Is it Ong Bak 2 or 3 where he gets rehabilitated and the girl who like heals him like is like a dancer, and she teaches these sacred dances or the traditional dances of the tribe, and it's him watching her do the dances, and he kind of realizes that like the Muay Thai is the masculine part of the tradition and these dances are the feminine part, and if he learns the feminine part he can like fuse them together, and he gains like super Muay Thai powers, and then finally he defeats himself and defeats the evil within his heart and is able to beat the bad guy at the end. So it's Ong Bak 3. Okay, yeah. That was that's just reminding me of this. It's like sacred dances are the key. I'm like, okay. Eternal Mastery says, sorry I missed most of your previous lives, but glad I joined now. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is this section spelling out egregores? Just trying to gauge. No. So he's done this huge chapter, this Eternal Mastery. He's done this huge chapter on art and all of these, why art was created, why the masters created art to kind of seal teachings in them. I think the whole thesis is basically wars happen and all of the teachings always get destroyed because of all the peculiarities that people have. It's like, not only do the teachings get destroyed, but people who reach attainment, they obviously don't participate in the wars, but then everyone looks at them, and because of their peculiarities of the Kunt Buffer, they assume that their neutrality becomes suspect, and then they become convinced that this person is an enemy, and the masters always get killed, are always the people who get, vilified and cut up, so they always get killed, and then the teachings always get burnt and destroyed. So some masters in Babylon were like, we need to figure out a way how to just send information down the line. So they invented art to seal or encode teachings into so that it can basically memes. They invented a way to mimetically perpetuate esoteric knowledge through history so that no matter how many wars or idiocy of man, kind of comes, that the teachings will continue to perpetuate. And so that's kind of where we're at. That's kind of what we're looking at. Yeah, Marshall says, union of opposites, dance with your anima. Carl Jung, exactly. Knife dancing is that a... So Dylan, are you doing a Britney Spears reference there? So, let's... Okay, so he's talking about sacred dances. Dance is the same as fighting, as they both improve your gross motor coordination. If you want to improve your fighting ability, learn dancing on the side. This is martial arts says, yes. There's something also about dance. I remember Gurdjieff saying at one point, dancers are the most intelligent people. It's almost like because there's this whole thing, when you meditate, what do people usually do? They usually use visualizations or imagination, but there's another style of meditation that's somatic. It's going into the body. It's going inside. And Gurdjieff, if you find, the main practices when people talk about fourth ways, they talk about self-observation and self-remembering. But there are a bunch of different sitting practices that Gurdjieff gave. They're usually just kept as oral traditions, so you don't really hear of them much. But a couple of them are talked about in Search of the Miraculous, but they're all kind of sink into the body, put the consciousness into the body, move the consciousness through the body. And so I think there's this thing about Gurdjieff and dance. I think he believes that kind of dance forces you to kind of get into that position. So it's kind of interesting that he puts so much importance on dance, that the sacred dance has actually kept a strong lineage all the way from Babylon, if anything. Very interesting. Eternal Mastery says, thank you for explaining. I'm grateful. I'd love if you could cover scrying in future. I'm an artist and have had that yearning for a path in that area. Okay. One day. Unironically, one thing that's interesting, if you want to learn a little bit about scrying in the future, scrying the future, if you want to learn about it, you can, I would say almost look at remote viewing. Remote viewing is such a dry, modern scientific term, but basically it's Mom, can we learn scrying? We have scrying at home. They've repackaged scrying into a way that just kind of makes sense and that they can study it in a way in parapsychological observatories. But via reading something like that, and then it's just very bland and plain, and you get it. You get the idea of it. Then going backwards into the literature and then reading actual scrying literature, you can kind of tease away what is ridiculous and what is oh no, that's actually practical. Now, so, 3, and thanks to this branch alone, which survived from the period of Babylon, Babylonian learned beings, a very limited number of 3-brained beings there now have the possibility by means of certain to decipher. Yep, we read that. And the second mentioned branch, which recently ceased to exist, was the branch of knowledge of the Babylonian learned beings, which they called the combination of different tonalities of color, and which the contemporary beings now call painting. It makes me wonder what Gurdjieff thought of Goethe and Goethe's color theory. I read something funny this morning, actually. It was on Twitter, where someone posted a line from Schopenhauer, where Schopenhauer's everyone likes Hegel and Schelling. But they always, and he's saying, but they're forgetting Goethe's color theory. And he had this whole thing, it was just kind of funny. It was just Chopin being, Chopin, just being bitter at idealism and how people don't understand the genius of Goethe. The passing of this branch from generation to generation proceeded almost everywhere, but through gradually disappearing also everywhere with the flow of time, it yet proceeded in quite recent times at a still quite regular tempo, both consciously and automatically, only among the beings of the community called Persia. Ooh, that's interesting. So not necessarily representational art of humans, but... Or is I wonder if he's getting into like, I don't know, Islamic kind of geometry art. Because in Islam, it was like forbade at one point to depicts the human form. And so all of their art just became incredibly geometrical and incredibly colorful, and that, you know, that's where you kind of get all those like psychedelic kind of art prints and mandalas from the Islamic schools. So it makes me wonder if he's referencing that or if he's referencing something older. I don't know much about Persian art. Nietzsche would know more. And it was only just before my last departure from that planet of yours when the influence of beings of a similar profession from the contemporary European culture began to become noticeable also there in Persia. And when the beings of that profession in the community, Persia began to wiseacre. Oh no, that such a transmission entirely ceased. It's always when people wiseacre. It's always when they're like, I have a smart idea, and then it ruins everything. It must also be noticed that in spite of all of this, not a few of the still surviving productions of the Babylonian times reached the beings of contemporary civilization. I mean, you know, paintings don't last, bruh. Chiefly the beings breeding on the continent Europe. But these productions which reached the beings of this contemporary civilization, and not originals, but only half-decayed copies made by their recent ancestors who had not become entirely what are called plagiarists, they simply, without suspect, the well of wisdom concealed in them, and without taking corresponding practicability measures, stuffed into what are called museums. These museums were these old copies are gradually either totally destroyed or partially mutilated by frequent copyings from them, made by means of various eroding and oxidizing compositions, as, for instance, alabaster, fish glue, and so on, only so that the copyists might swagger before their friends, or cheat their teachers, or achieve some other Hasnamusian aim. I love that phrase, Hasnamusian aim. Marshall says, haha, yeah, I remember one of your videos talking about how Goethe introduced his niece to Hegel. And he was a madman, then Goethe was like, yeah, that was Hegel. Yeah. Good times, good times. It must, in fairness, be remarked that now and again, certain beings of contemporary civilization have suspected that something was concealed in the productions which chanced to reach them in the original. Totally. And I think, you know, once again, Gurdjieff is also, you know, an absence is a presence. He's not mentioning things which makes them glare louder. Like in Renaissance paintings, there's something there. And, you know, the post-Raphaelite and all of those kind of things. There are some painters, like late painters, like, was it Bouguereau? How do you even spell Bouguereau's name now? God damn, I'm not even going to attempt it. But Bronzino is interesting. Bronzino. Oh, fuck, how do I spell Zeno? Yeah, that's right. This guy, I always thought was really interesting. So Bronzino, he did mainly portrait paintings. As you can see, that's, you know, people don't really know much about Bronzino. He's one of the lesser talked about kind of Renaissance artists. But there's this one portrait of Bronzino. It's his self-portrait, and it's this one here, where he's all like, But here's the thing about this. This book right here always made me go, huh. Because in kind of like, you know, occult interpretation, whenever there's a book, it always means something. It always depicts knowledge. A closed book means secret knowledge. So what does Bronzino have in this picture? This is a portrait of him, and he's got a closed book in his hand, and his finger is dipping in between the pages. So and he's looking at us with this like schmarmy, like, He's basically looking at us like, see this? See this right here? This is secret knowledge. This is occult knowledge, and I've got a little bit of it. I've got knowledge that you don't. That's what he's kind of saying. So I've kind of always see like these Renaissance painters and people who kind of came after them as continuing this, like there's a very interesting occult lineage there. There's something there. But, you know, I'm not like full into that side of things, so. But that's one thing I always remember, I always think about, is just this one random Bronzino painting that makes me think that. Anyway, now back to it. So, which chanced to reach them in the original. Sorry, just Marshall says, Bronzino's name reminds me of Benzino, one of Eminem's victims that was sent to the Shadow Realm. Okay, specially created then in Babylon by the members of the Club of the Adherents of Legomenisms. Okay. Must be remarked in fairness now, certain beings, contemporary civilians, have suspected. So there's some people have suspected it. Bro is fingering the esoteric. Sorry, I'm just chat is getting to me again. Was concealed in the productions which chanced to reach them in the original, specifically created then in Babylon by the members of the Club of the Adherents of Legomenism, or in those copies which were made during their transmission from generation to generation by various conscientious professionals. So it's like every now and then scholars are dumb, but every now and then there are some scholars and professionals that go, they love their art so much they actually do feel that they feel the thing beyond the image. There's something behind the image. There's something behind the art that's trying to speak to them. That is by such professionals to whom I've already said it was still not proper to plagiarize, and who therefore did not resort to the detailed remaking of others' productions in order to give them out as their own, and thereafter, while searching very seriously for this something, certain of those inquiring beings of that European civilization even found in them a certain definite something or other. For instance, at the beginning of the contemporary European civilization, one of these beings, a certain monk named Ignatius, hello, say what? We getting, is this Ignatian of Loyola? Is this the Jesuits, founding of the Jesuits? We getting here? What's going on here? Who had formerly been an architect, okay, maybe not. Who am I thinking of? Anyway, well, let's see what Gurdjieff says. He, formerly been an architect, attained even to the possibility of deciphering the hidden knowledge and useful information in the productions of almost all the branches of what are already called ancient art, which had reached him from the Babylonian epoch. But when this monk Ignatius was about to share what is called this said discovery of his with other beings there like himself, namely with two of his what are called comrades, monks together, with whom he is a specialist, had been sent by his abbot for the purpose of directing the laying of what are called the foundations of a temple, which later became famous, then for some trifling reason ensuing from the consequences of one of the properties of the organ Kundabuffer crystallized in them called envy, he was murdered while asleep, and his planetary body was thrown into the water space surrounding the small island on which it was proposed to erect the said temple. As always happens. I even remember, there was some, Buddhist teaching of, two monks that left their lamasery, or their temple, and went out to find teachings. And they both went out and kind of found different masters, went to other places and recorded teachings down, and then they came back with all of these scrolls. And when they were on the boat back to their temple, they were like, hey, let's read each other's stuff, see what you got. And one of the monks was just reading what this guy got and was like, oh my god, this is amazing, it's so much better than my stuff. And he was so jealous that he threw all of the teachings, all of that monk's teachings into the water. Was like, oh, whoops, it's just mine now. And the other guy was like, bruh. And so the other monk was just like, okay, well, I just have to recite from memory. And so he went through and really tried to memory and really tried to kind of apply these teachings. And through doing that, the monk that had his stuff thrown in the river actually gained enlightenment in this Buddhist story. I was like, oh, okay. So it's whereas the bookish boy, the envious bookish boy, just stayed as an unnamed scholar forever, only remembered as an unnamed scholar in this one story, whereas the other guy became like a Buddhist saint or whatever. I was like, well, that's what you get. So similar story here. We get one guy who figures it all out, and then he makes the mistake of telling an associate, who is then like, wow, that's really cool. Hey, does this rag smell like chloroform? And then throws him in the river. The said monk Ignatius arose and was formed for the being of a responsible being on the continent Europe But when he reached the age of a responsible being, then with the aim of enriching himself with information concerning the Ignatius of Antioch, Tyler says. Okay, possible, very possible, very possible. We'll check it out later. But when he reached the age of a responsible being, then with the aim of enriching himself with information concerning the profession which he had made the aim of his existence, namely the profession there called architecture, he left for the continent of Africa. He got jungle fever and was just... It was who entered as a monk into the brotherhood which existed on the continent of Africa. Is this like in Egypt or in Ethiopia or something? Under the name of Truth Seekers. See, some of these things now just sound like Facebook pages. Truth Seekers page, and it's just like Eckhart Tolle quotes, and you're like, oh god, another one of these. And afterwards, when this brotherhood migrated to the continent Europe, and increased, and when its brethren began to be called Benedictines. Hello! Who was a Benedictine? It was Thomas à Kempis, Imitation of Christ, was a Benedictine monk. There is some esoteric stuff. That's so interesting. So, I'm guessing North Africa, I'm guessing Egypt. So a secret brotherhood in Egypt made its way into Europe and became the Benedictines. That's interesting. That's interesting. He himself was already an all the rights possessor brother, and this said brotherhood, the temple I referred to exist there even up till now, seems to be... It seems Mont Saint-Michel. Is that one where it's just like that island with that kick-ass castle on it? Oh, yeah. Okay, so this is an esoteric place. Damn, son. Imagine living there. Where is this? Where are you in the world? Another guy says, yo, hey, another guy. Oh, Mont Saint-Michel. Just pop across the channel. Of course, it's in France. Oh my god. Original Jersey. Not the new one. And there's a Guernsey? Okay. Bournemouth. Southampton. Okay. So it's right over here. Damn. Gotta go to France one day, guys. I know. The bad thing about going to France is... I mean, the good thing is you get to see stuff like this. The bad thing is you also have to meet French people, but nonetheless. Goes to Africa, then becomes a brother. Hell yeah. Exactly. Oh. Or maybe even other African countries who have rich shamanic traditions. Yeah. It's possible. The reason why I think it's specifically Egypt is because he's specifically an architect. So the Order of the African Architects, it's always about Egypt. Hence why I just think it just has to be there. I mean, there's going to be some... He mentioned, some other secret African brotherhoods at a certain point, one in the middle of Africa, and, there's going to be a bunch of other... I mean, if Ethiopia has a lot of interesting stuff about it. As well as, what Mali, the ancient civilization there. I always remember, because that had a rich library and a rich kind of a literary tradition as well. So I always wonder about stuff there. Anyway, in this Europe, still several other inquiring beings noticed from time to time lawful inexactitudes in the works of various branches of art, which had reached them from ancient times. But no sooner did they find the key to understanding of these inexactitudes than their existence came to an end. God damn. Still, one other, that is, another being from that continent, Europe, also noticed them, and continuing to interest himself and laboring perseveringly, he began fully to decipher the productions of almost all the branches of art. So it seems like... Yeah, Morocco, cool too. Yes, Morocco also has some incredibly esoteric things. And the Atlanteans did have a stronghold in southern Africa at one point. Yeah, most likely. The Atlanteans had strongholds like everywhere at one point. Swear to God. But this is really interesting. It seems like if you get really into art, you only need to kind of unlock one, and then once you unlock one, you kind of just see the mystery in all the others. So if it's architecture and go really deep, you all of a sudden it connects to all the others. Or all the, painting or dance. It's very interesting, very interesting. Oh, and this wise terrestrial free brain being was named Leonardo da Vinci. Hey, okay. So giving a little respect to the European tradition here. So Leonardo da Vinci was the one that realized the legomenism. At the conclusion of my present tale about the terrestrial contemporary art, I might as well, I think, remark about yet one other of the many specific particularities of just those beings of the contemporary civilization who are occupied with this famous art. This specific particularity of theirs is that whenever one or other of the mentioned beings, namely of the beings who notice in various productions which have reached them from ancient times, some very lawfully illogicality, and began to produce the given branch in quite a new manner, perhaps in order to make the said lawful illogicality practically clear to himself, then most of the beings around him belonging to that profession of the same branch at once become his followers and begin doing supposedly the same thing, but of course without either aim or sense. Beelzebub shouting out Da Vinci, hell yeah. And it is just because of this said specific psyche of the beings there, representatives of contemporary art, that on the one hand, new, what are called movements of art, are always arising there among your favorites. And on the other hand, I wonder what Gurdjieff thought about Marinetti and futurism. Did he mention him at one point? Am I tripping? Anyway, on the other hand, that those which are somehow arranged rightly by the preceding generations, even though only after a fashion, are constantly dwindling. Although this proceeds among the representatives of all the branches of contemporary art, yet for some reason or other, it is the beings who are occupied in the branch they call painting who are most susceptible to it. Hence, it is that at the present time there exists among these contemporary professions a great many new movements of painting which have arisen in this way and which have nothing in common among themselves. These new movement of painting are known by the names of cubism, futurism, synthesis. Yeah, whatever. Imagism, impressionism, colorism, formalism, surrealism, and many other similar movements whose names also end in isms. At this place in Beelzebub's tale, the hoofs of all the passengers of the trans-space ship Karnak suddenly, as it were, radiated from themselves something phosphorescent. Did they fart? This meant that the ship was nearing the place of her destination. Okay, they felt the inertia. That is the planet Revosvradendir. Hence, a bustling movement began among the passengers preparing to descend from the ship. Syncretism. Syncretism, is that what that is? That's not syncretism. What are you talking about, Dylan? It says synthesism. Anyway, Beelzebub, Hassian, and Ahun ended their conversation and hurriedly began to prepare themselves also. Okay, so the narrative of the actual story now is progressing. Marshall says, I'm a part of the artistic movement of autism. Yes, me too. Aren't we all? Aren't we? Well, we're on the internet, so we must be. The phosphorescent gleaming of the hooves was obtained because concentrated in a particular proportion there were directed from the engine room to the part of the ship, the holy parts of the sacred present Okidana. Okay, that's interesting. But wow, okay. Okay. That is very interesting. We finished that whole goddamn chapter on art. That was a good chapter. That had a lot of juicy stuff in it. This next chapter is starting off real freaking interesting. I can see already. Oof, goddamn. But yeah, we'll chapter 30 complete. We're almost to, what is it, chapter 36, 38? We're almost to Planet Purgatory. But yeah, there's been some good stuff. There's been some real good stuff. Like chapter 23 and 28 were like some of my faves so far. I gotta think. But yeah. Goddamn Gurgy Burgy. Now I gotta go look up some Filipino art, traditional art, and see what they got. Anyway, thank you guys for sticking around and helping me finish that last chapter. Hope you guys all enjoyed. See you guys in the next one. And if you want to support the channel, like and subscribe, all of that hoo-ha, blah, 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 Ko-fi account, PayPal. You know what's up. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.